Milton is the poetical son of Spenser. This is the statement given by John Dryden about John Milton. In this video, we will talk about Milton's personal and political life and how they are interrelated with his literary career. Both Caroline Age and Interregnum period is known as the age of John Milton in English literature. He was born in 1608 and died in 1674. He died due to God, but it is controversial that he died because of God or due to consumption. His resting place is St. Galli's Cripplegate. He was a Puritan. Puritans were those who believed strongly in English church. They were the followers of John Calvin. He became blind in 1652 in the same year in which his first wife also died. He knew many languages and wrote in three of them English, Latin, and Italian. In 1638, he went on a tour to France and Italy, which gave him inspiration to write some of his famous works. His father was John Milton, his mother was Sarah Jeffrey. His father was scrivener and music composer. His first wife, Mary Powell, was half of his age, and their relationship did not succeed. They wanted divorce, but during that period, divorce was illegal in England, and it gave inspiration to Milton to write his divorce tracts. He wrote four divorce tracts in his career, which argues on the separation of husband and wife on the basis of incompatibility. His education started early at home, tutored by Thomas Young. He studied at Paul's School and went to Cambridge, Christ's College. There he was also known as the Lady of Christ. He became friend with Edward King in his Cambridge years. He dedicated one of his most famous works, Lycidas, to him. In this poem, he laments about the death of the Edward King. He died due to drowning in Irish siege. In 1642, civil war started in England. It was one of the most significant part in history. 1642 is the year in which theatres were also banned in England. This is the most eminent part in English literature because as theatres were banned, plays were also not written during those days. From 1642 to 1660, theatres were banned in England. In 1642, civil war broke out and Puritans fought against their king Charles I. Charles I was a king who married to a French woman who was a Catholic, and Puritans didn't like that. During those days, Puritans were very strong and they fought against the king in the leadership of Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell was a great soldier, and Milton also became one of the leading members of the Puritans. They fought against him and finally they won, and Charles I was found guilty. In 1649, Charles I was arrested, he was found guilty, and he was executed in front of the public. This is the only execution in the history of monarchy of England in which king was beheaded in front of the whole public. In 1649, after the execution of the King Charles I, Puritans formed an empire. They formed a parliament known as Parliament of Saints. It is also known as by many different names as the Commonwealth period or the Interregnum period. They didn't. There was no king during 1649 to 1660 because Puritans didn't believe in the royalty. So it was a parliament in which some of the saints, some of the Puritans were there and they decided about the well being of their country. It is also known as the democracy, first democracy of England. The Puritan age or the interregnum age is also known as the first democracy of England from 1649 to 1660. It is quite sarcastic because Puritans were those who believed in the concept of born sinners. They believed that Adam and Eve were sent on earth as a punishment and they are continuing their punishment, so they should not take any pleasure. Pleasure was sin according to them, and so they banned all the pleasures that used to be there in England, and theaters were also a part of it. Even the wine was banned. Wine is holy thing, although, but it was banned for the public use. It was only used in church. It is considered as first democracy of England, although. From 1649 to 1660, Puritan Empire was there in England, and it is also known as the Protectorate Age because Oliver Cromwell protected England from Charles I, and hence he was given the title of Lord Protectorate. One another reason for civil war to broke out was the difference of thoughts between Puritans and Catholics. Catholics were those who believed in Roman Church, but Puritans were those who believed strictly in the Church of England. They were liberals. Catholics were the followers of Charles I, and few of the writers. There was a group of poets who was known as Cavalier poets, who was the court poets of Charles I. This group consists of Robert Herrick, Thomas Cardew, John Suckling, Robert Lovelace, and some of them like this. Puritans were those were totally different from Catholics. They wanted their own church, they wanted the Church of England, and so they boycotted the Roman Church. And hence, they broke out as a war. But in 1658, when Cromwell died, then Puritans became weak, and by that time, the people of England were also bored of the Puritan Empire, and they were also very stressed due to the restrictions that Puritans bring with them, and they thought that they lagged behind, and their neighboring countries got ahead with techniques. And hence in 1660, Charles II came back to the throne. He came back to England, he restored the monarchy in 1660, theatres were reopened in 1660, and who those members who were played the leading role in the execution of Charles I were arrested, and some of them were killed too. Milton was also arrested, but he was left after taking fine. According to W.H. Hudson, the Caroline Age and the Interregnum combined together is known as the Age of Milton, which starts from 1625 to 1660. Milton, born in 1608 and died in 1674, the age of Milton starts from 1625 and ends in 1660 by the end of Puritan age. After 1660, he wrote some of his most famous works, among which is Paradise Lost, his magnum opus. He started his career at his early age. An epitaph on the admirable dramatic poet William Shakespeare is considered to be his first poem to got printed in 1630. This he wrote during his Cambridge years. It was his early work. His career can be divided into three parts: his early age and his middle age, in which he wrote political works, and his last age, in which he wrote the epics like Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Agonistes. Some of the most famous works, the major works of John Milton, consists of On the Morning of Christ's Nativity, and El Eligero and Il Penseroso are companion poems published in 1631. It was also written during his Cambridge years. El Alighiero means the happy man, and Il Penseroso means the melancholy man. On the late massacre of impediment, Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, Samson Agonistes are the Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Agonistes are three epic poems, in which Paradise Lost is most famous, in which he talks about Adam and Eve, the fall of Adam and Eve, and the Saturn. He wrote On His Blindness in 1652. He didn't give the title of On His Blindness. He wrote it with the title When I Consider How My Light Is Spent. But it was most famously known as On His Blindness. This title was given to the poem by Thomas Newton. His most famous prose works consist of Areopagitica, which came out in 1644. In this, he wrote against the Licensing Act. During 1644, civil war was going on, and hence Charles I applied the Licensing Act, which restricted writers to write things. And Milton wrote against the Licensing Act, and he said that writers would be free to write anything, and he says that writers are like God and they speak the truth. So they so politics should not restrict the writers from writing anything. His another famous works are Iconoclastes. He wrote two of the defensive works, defensive prose works, Defensio pro Popula Anglicano and Defensio Scondas. Some of his other famous works are his Four Divorce Tracts, which is very famous, which is inspired from his first wife's relation. It consists of Doctrine and Discipline of Divorce. Doctrine and Discipline of Divorce came out in 1643. Then Judgment of Martin Bucer concerning divorce came out in 1644. Then Tetrahedron and Cholesterion came out in the same year in 1645. A treatise to civil power is one of the most eminent works in 1649. Then The Ready and Easy Way to Establish a Free Commonwealth in 1660. He wrote many of the poems, but these are some of his most famous works. His other works also commemorates the most significant.